I guess just first off, how is Caitlin after Wednesday, and do you have any updates on her condition?
Yeah, she's okay. She's going to be out on Saturday, but she's doing all right.
Do you have any indication right now of how long she will be out?
No indication. Obviously, it's a good time because we have all week next week, so we'll take this opportunity just to get her treatment, get her healthy, get her back on the floor, and see.
Listen to what Stephanie White is actually saying in this press conference. She's not giving you information, she's managing a narrative. Watch her face when she talks about Caitlin Clark being out for Saturday's game against LA. Notice the pause before she answers. Notice how she immediately pivots to talking about the week off, about treatment, about long-term health and wellness. That's not how a coach talks about a routine back injury. That's someone trying to control a situation that's spiraling beyond her control. Because here's what nobody's saying out loud, and here's what we're going to unpack in the next few minutes. Caitlin Clark being benched from the Connecticut game, then listed as out for Saturday, 3 days after getting a closed fist to the throat area that the refs somehow missed in real time. The pieces don't add up. And the timing, everything about this screams something deeper is happening in Indiana. Something that goes way beyond one game or one injury or even one missed call. This is about a franchise that's had every advantage handed to them and still found a way to completely mismanage the biggest star in women's basketball. And if you've been watching The Fever this season, if you've noticed the tension every time Caitlin and Stephanie White are on camera together, if you've seen the questionable coaching decisions and the lack of protection from the referees, then you already know something's wrong. So let's start with what we know, and then we'll dig into what everyone's too scared to say out loud.
Watch The Fever. And I watch them consistently. I watch the WNBA consistently. I think it's a good product. And what I saw last night with these two teams tangling in back-to-back games, because it got heated 3 days ago when I watched it, was absolutely unacceptable, egregious. Stephanie White used the word, and just unfortunate that, you know, a situation, two situations could go untethered, if you will. And
Stephanie White is sitting in front of the cameras and she's being asked a straightforward question. Caitlin Clark is out for Saturday. How long will she be out? What's the timeline? These are simple questions that should have simple answers. If Caitlin has a back strain, the Fever's medical staff should know roughly how long recovery takes. They should have some indication of whether she'll be back next week or if this is a longer-term issue. But listen to what Stephanie says instead. No indication, that's the answer. No indication? Then she immediately starts talking about how they have all week off, so this is a good time to get Caitlin treatment, to get her healthy, to get her back on the floor, and we can see what happens. That's not how you talk about a straightforward injury. That's how you talk about a situation you're still figuring out how to manage. Because if the injury was clear-cut, if it was just a back strain that needed a few days of rest, Stephanie White would have said so. She would have said something like, "We're hopeful she'll be back in a week or two," or "It's day-to-day," or "We're being cautious but optimistic." Instead, she gave you nothing, no indication, just vague corporate speak about treatment and wellness. And then she went right back to her favorite phrase, the one she used last season, the one we heard during the Olympic break, the one that comes out every single time there's a question about Caitlin's availability. Long-term health and wellness is the most important thing. At this point, that phrase has become meaningless. It's been used so many times in so many different contexts that it's basically lost all information value. It just means the Fever aren't going to tell you what's actually going on. It means the coaching staff is managing perceptions instead of managing a player. And if you've been watching basketball long enough, you know that when a coach starts using vague language about a star player's injury, something else is usually going on beneath the surface. So what happened in the game before this press conference? What happened in Connecticut that led to Caitlin being pulled from the game and then suddenly having a back injury that nobody saw coming? That's where this story starts to get interesting. Because the timeline of events that day tells you something completely different than what Stephanie White is saying in public.
Before going further, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. It really helps us keep bringing you the content you love. Share this video with your friends so they don't miss out on all the drama and excitement.
And the result was the result.
How did we get here?
I could tell you how we got here. We got here through hate, envy, jealousy, hostility, nastiness from the players, immaturity from the players. That is how we got here, and we got here with the commissioner, Kathy Engelbert, who should have been fired, who has no clue what she's doing and how to handle. She was unprepared for Caitlin Clark's stardom coming into this league. That is how you got here.
I don't know how to answer this. All I can tell you is there's a lot of good players in WNBA. For instance, if you're not watching Olivia Miles in Minnesota right now, you're missing something special. She's extraordinary. And Caitlin Clark is extraordinary.
Let's rewind to the Connecticut game. Caitlin Clark was having a solid game, not spectacular, but solid. She was moving well, running the offense, doing the things she normally does. She wasn't putting up 30 points or having one of those historic performances we've gotten used to seeing from her, but she was playing fine. The game was competitive, the Fever were in it, and then something happened that changed everything. Caitlin had a turnover, a mistake on offense. And on the very next possession, she didn't get back on defense fast enough. Connecticut scored an easy layup. And immediately, Stephanie White pulled her from the game, not after the next dead ball, not after the next timeout, right away. Caitlin came out, and according to the injury report that came later, she had a back injury and couldn't return. Now, here's where a lot of people started reading between the lines. Because if Caitlin's back was hurting so badly that she couldn't play another second of basketball, where was that pain before the turnover? She was moving fine, she was running fine. There was no visible sign of discomfort, no grabbing at her back, no limping, no wincing, nothing. And then suddenly, after one defensive mistake, she's got a back injury so serious that she can't return to the game and she's going to miss the next game entirely. The timeline doesn't make sense unless you consider what might actually be happening here. Maybe Caitlin does have a back injury, maybe it's been bothering her for a while, but maybe, just maybe, Stephanie White used that minor back issue as justification to keep her on the bench after pulling her for a performance reason. Think about what that means. Caitlin Clark is averaging over 35 minutes per game this season. She's played through contact that would sideline most players. She's taken elbows, forearms, hip checks, and illegal screens all season long without missing time. She's been physically targeted by opponents and she's kept playing. But one turnover, one defensive lapse, and suddenly her back is too hurt to return? And Stephanie White benches her franchise player, her leading scorer, the player who sells out every arena the Fever visit, the player who's generating more revenue for this organization than anyone in the history of this franchise. She benches her for one mistake while she's dealing with what might be a minor back issue. That tells you everything you need to know about the coaching dysfunction in Indiana right now. Because stars don't get benched for one turnover and one missed defensive assignment, not in the playoffs, not in a game that matters, not when that player has been carrying your entire franchise on her shoulders for an entire season. But here's the thing that really connects all of this. The reason why Caitlin's back might have suddenly become an issue right after that game, it's not just about one defensive mistake, it's about what happened earlier in that Connecticut game, something that the referees completely missed, something that nobody in the WNBA office seems interested in addressing.
Rolling. Now, Stephanie White addressed Caitlin Clark being out for Saturday's game. We're going to get into that. And many people feel like the writing is on the wall. Okay, now do I think Caitlin Clark has a back injury? Yes. Do I think the back injury solely is why she did not return last game? No. I think that if Stephanie White didn't sub her out after that turnover in which she didn't get back on defense and she gave up a layup, I think Caitlin Clark would have continued to play out the game. But did she have a back injury? Yeah, I believe she has a back injury. I just don't believe that that is the reason why she was out completely for the rest of last game.
There's a moment in the Connecticut game where Caitlin Clark is driving to the basket. Alyssa Thomas is defending her, and what happens next is what everyone's been talking about. Thomas throws a forearm, not a hand check, not a bump. A closed fist to Caitlin Clark's throat area. It's the kind of contact that should get called immediately. It's the kind of play that should result in an ejection and a suspension. But in the moment, the refs called it a common foul. They didn't even see it for what it was. It took social media outrage and replay reviews for the league office to upgrade it to a flagrant one after the fact. And even then, Alyssa Thomas only got a one-game suspension. Think about that. A closed fist strike to the throat area of an opponent gets you one game on the bench. One game. In the NBA, a similar incident would get you multiple games. Draymond Green got suspended for less contact than that in the playoffs. But this is the WNBA, where Caitlin Clark gets officiated by a completely different standard than everyone else. And before anyone says that's an exaggeration, you don't need to take our word for it. Stacey Dales said it herself in an interview. She said she watched that play in real time and knew immediately it was flagrant. She didn't need slow motion. She didn't need social media. She knew right away that it was a dangerous play that should have been called. So what's the excuse? Why are the referees missing these calls in the moment? And more importantly, why is the league only upgrading flagrant fouls to the correct level after the fact, after they've already seen the public reaction? It's because there's an inconsistency in how Caitlin Clark is being protected compared to other star players in this league. When Caitlin shoots from the logo, when she takes three-pointers from 30 feet away, the refs seem to be so focused on whether she traveled or stepped out of bounds that they're completely missing defenders undercutting her on landing zones. They're missing forearms to the throat. They're missing the kind of contact that would get called flagrant immediately if it happened to any other star player. And the result is what we're seeing right now. A player who's being physically targeted because the referees have failed to protect her consistently. But this isn't just about one game or one missed call. This is a pattern that's been building since Caitlin Clark entered this league back in April 2024. And once you start looking for it, once you start paying attention to the inconsistencies, you can't unsee it. The illegal closeouts where they don't even check the landing zone. The flagrant fouls that get downgraded. The physical play that gets labeled as playoff basketball when it happens to Clark, but gets called tight for everyone else.
What happens? I mean, it's the same thing. Long-term health and wellness is the most important thing.
Long-term health and wellness, the same old Stephanie White go-to. I mean, I think Caitlin Clark wants out. At this point, I think she was having a really good game, and then after a turnover, Stephanie White benched her. I think Caitlin Clark was pissed.
If you've been watching the Fever consistently this season, you've noticed something. The officiating is not the same when Caitlin Clark is on the court versus when she's on the bench. When she's playing offense, the refs seem to have a much higher tolerance for contact. Defenders are grabbing her off ball, setting illegal screens, undercutting her on three-point attempts, and the whistle doesn't blow. But when Caitlin is on defense, suddenly the refs are calling everything tight, every little hand check. Every minor contact. It's almost like they're officiating the game by two different sets of rules depending on who has the ball, and this isn't speculation. Multiple analysts and commentators have pointed this out. Stacey Dales has mentioned it. Other WNBA observers have brought it up. The inconsistency is there for anyone who wants to see it. Part of the problem, according to some people in the basketball world, is that Caitlin Clark is genuinely hard to officiate. She shoots from the logo with a gather step. Most players don't do that. Most players don't pull up from 30 feet away the way Caitlin does, and because she's doing something unusual, the refs have to make split-second decisions about whether she traveled or stepped out of bounds. Stacey Dales mentioned this specifically. She said Caitlin is really hard to officiate because of how she shoots. But here's the thing, that's not an excuse for missing obvious calls. That's actually the problem. The refs are so focused on one aspect of her game that they're completely missing other aspects. They're so worried about whether she stepped out that they're not watching whether the defender is undercutting her. They're so concentrated on the gather step that they're not noticing the forearm to the throat. And when you're the referee in charge of protecting the integrity and safety of the game, when you're supposed to be watching out for dangerous plays that could injure a player, that's a massive failure. Because Caitlin Clark has been playing in pain for weeks, maybe months. She's been dealing with back issues while playing through the physical contact that the refs have failed to call. She's been pushing through injuries because that's what professional athletes do. They play through pain, they tough it out, but there's a limit to how much punishment a body can take, especially when the referees aren't doing their job to protect the player from that punishment. And maybe that's what finally happened in the Connecticut game. Maybe Caitlin's back finally gave out because she's been compensating for a previous injury, or she's been tensing up to brace for contact that she knew was coming but the refs weren't going to call. Maybe the back injury is the cumulative effect of weeks of unprotected physical play finally catching up with her. But if that's what happened, if Caitlin's back injury is the result of inadequate protection from the referees, then the story gets even bigger. Because this isn't just about one game or one ref crew. This is about systemic failures in how the WNBA is managing its most valuable asset. And those systemic failures start at the top, with the coaching staff and the front office in Indiana.
I played against Sue Bird, Dinah Taurasi, Lisa Leslie, Cheryl Swoops. Caitlin does things. She's really hard to guard, Dan, and she's really hard to officiate. For instance, the closeout, the illegal closeout, where the player didn't have the landing space appropriate, that should have been upgraded to a flagrant 1. It was unnecessary contact, but
they didn't even check the landing zone. They checked to see if Caitlin hit her in the face. I mean, officiating in the WNBA is just a joke. It's just a joke.
She did step into the landing space. When a player shoots it from the logo with a gather step, like Caitlin does, there's not a lot of players that do that. Now, I mean, Kelsey Mitchell, her teammate, does it extraordinarily well. There's a few players that do it well. She's mastered it.
Kelsey Mitchell don't shoot from the logo. Sorry. No, I don't. Look. Enough with the Kelsey stuff. She don't pull up from the logo. So it's hard to defend her, which is the result. You get these flagrant 1 type calls, which wasn't called. So, and that was after the Alyssa Thomas.
Let's talk about what Caitlin Clark has dealt with from the Indiana Fever organization in less than 2 seasons. When she first got drafted by Indiana, the team hired Christy Sides as head coach. And Christy Sides' approach was immediately problematic. Instead of building an entire offense around a generational talent, instead of adjusting the team's system to maximize Caitlin's unique abilities, Christy Sides started talking publicly about how Caitlin needed to adjust to the professional game. How she needed to learn to play defense better. How she needed to be more of a team player. All of this while Caitlin was putting up historic numbers and breaking records. Think about what a message that sends. Your rookie franchise player is doing things nobody's ever done before in the WNBA, and your head coach is telling the media that she needs to adjust, that she's not ready, that she's not playing the game the right way. And it wasn't just Christy Sides saying this stuff. Veterans on the team were openly questioning Caitlyn's role and playing time in media interviews. There were reports about tension in the locker room, about players who resented a rookie coming in and immediately becoming the focal point of the offense and the franchise. The front office did nothing to manage this situation. They didn't step in and establish Caitlyn as the alpha. They didn't set the tone that this was her team and everyone else needed to adapt. They just let the dysfunction build. And when it became clear that Christy Sides wasn't working out, that her approach was toxic and her coaching was ineffective, the Fever made another questionable decision. They replaced her with Stephanie White. Now, Stephanie White came in with a fresh approach. She talked about accountability and defensive intensity and playing the right way. All of that sounds great in press conferences. But what it's meant in practice is that the player who sells out every arena the Fever visit, the player who's generated more revenue for this franchise in one season than the previous 5 years combined, gets benched for one defensive lapse while dealing with what might be a minor injury. Gets pulled from a game she was playing well in because she didn't get back on defense fast enough after a turnover. This is not how you manage a generational talent. This is not how you build a championship organization. You don't bench your best player for a mistake. You certainly don't bench them for one mistake while they're dealing with an injury. And if Stephanie White felt the need to pull Caitlyn from that game as a disciplinary measure, as a way to send a message about accountability, then she's got a fundamental misunderstanding of how to lead a star player. Because when you're trying to build a championship team around someone with Caitlyn's talent, when you're trying to maximize her potential and build a system where she can thrive, the last thing you do is pull her from games for mistakes. You let her play through it, you give her the opportunity to figure it out on the court, you show her that you trust her, and more importantly, you protect her from the kind of physical play that's been targeting her all season long. The Fever front office has failed on every single one of these fronts. They hired a coach who didn't believe in Caitlyn, then they fired that coach and replaced her with one who seems to be using her as a teaching tool for accountability rather than building a system around her talents. They haven't addressed the locker room dysfunction. They haven't brought in the kind of talent that would make Caitlyn's job easier. They haven't protected her from physical play. And they certainly haven't been transparent about her injury status or the coaching decisions being made. So when we see Caitlin Clark sitting out against LA, when we hear Stephanie White giving vague non-answers about her timeline, when we notice the tension between the coach and the player every time they're on camera together, we're not seeing a straightforward injury situation. We're seeing the end result of months of organizational incompetence and coaching dysfunction. And if you're Caitlin Clark, if you're the player who's done everything that was asked of her and more, what are you thinking at this point? Let's think about what that moment in the Connecticut game must have felt like from Caitlin's perspective. She's been playing through pain all season. She's been dealing with unprotected physical contact from opponents. She's been trying to adjust to a coaching staff that seems more interested in holding her accountable than building around her. And then after one turnover, after one defensive mistake that any player might make during a long game, her coach pulls her from the game. Right there in the moment in front of everyone, that's a public statement. That's a message being sent. That's "I don't trust you, I don't believe in you right now, you need to sit down." For a player like Caitlin Clark, someone who's accustomed to being the best player on every court she's ever stepped on, someone who's never had to prove her worth or her work ethic to anyone, that moment would be humiliating. And it would also be revealing. Because in that moment, Caitlin would have realized something that maybe she'd been avoiding thinking about until then. This organization doesn't get it. This coach doesn't get it. This front office doesn't understand what they have and they don't know how to manage it. Think about what Caitlin had already been through by that point in the season. She dealt with Christy Sides' dismissive coaching. She dealt with veterans in her own locker room questioning whether she belonged. She dealt with opponents targeting her physically because the refs weren't protecting her. She'd been pulled from the Olympic team for reasons that were never fully explained. She'd played through back pain and other injuries because that's what professional athletes do. She'd pushed through injuries because that's what professional athletes do, and she'd done all of this while putting up historic numbers, breaking records, selling out arenas, generating revenue, carrying her franchise on her shoulders. And then the one time she makes a mistake, the one time she doesn't get back on defense fast enough, she gets benched. And suddenly she's got a back injury so serious that she misses the next game. Maybe that back injury appeared suddenly after that benching because of the stress and disappointment. Maybe the physical pain intensified because of the emotional blow of being benched. Or maybe Caitlin and her team used that minor back issue as a reason to shut things down and give her time to think about what comes next. Whatever the reason, that moment in Connecticut changed something. It shifted the relationship between Caitlin and the Fever organization from strained to broken. And if you're paying attention to the body language, if you're listening to what people around this situation are saying, you can feel that shift happening in real time. And once that shift happens, once a player reaches that level of frustration with an organization, there's really only one path forward. Because Caitlin Clark has options. She has leverage, she's the biggest star in women's basketball, and if she decides that Indiana isn't the place for her, she has ways to make that happen. We need to talk about what might actually be coming next. Here's the reality that nobody in the Indiana Fever front office seems to want to confront. Caitlin Clark has leverage, real leverage, not just because she's the best player on the team, but because she's the most marketable player in women's basketball right now. She's the reason people are paying attention to the WNBA. She's the reason arenas are selling out. She's the reason the league was able to negotiate better television deals. She matters more to this league's success than almost anyone else currently playing, which means she has power. And power combined with frustration and a broken relationship with an organization often leads to one thing: trade requests. Now the WNBA doesn't have unrestricted free agency the way the NBA does. Caitlin is under contract with Indiana, but players have ways to force trades if they're determined enough. There are ways to make it clear to an organization that the relationship isn't working and everyone would be better off with a fresh start. It happens in the NBA all the time. A star player gets frustrated with their team's direction, with coaching decisions, with the organization's ability to build around them. They make it known either publicly or privately that they want out. And if the player is significant enough, if the backlash to keeping an unhappy star would be too damaging to the franchise's reputation and future, the organization usually has to listen. The question is whether the Fever front office is going to wait until Caitlin makes it public that she wants out, or whether they're going to have serious conversations with her about the future right now, while there's still time to fix things. Because if they wait too long, if they let this situation fester, if Caitlin comes back from this injury and still feels like the organization doesn't support her and doesn't believe in her, then we're going to start hearing rumors in the offseason. We're going to start seeing reports that Caitlin's camp has reached out to other teams. We're going to start watching the Fever's situation spiral from organizational dysfunction to full-on franchise crisis. And here's what makes this even more significant. There are teams around the league that would move mountains to get Caitlin Clark. There are organizations with better coaching, better front offices, better rosters that could build championship teams around her immediately. If Caitlin decides that she wants out, if she makes it known that she's interested in playing for another team, the Fever would have to seriously consider trading her. Because the alternative, keeping an unhappy star player, watching her play out the final years of her contract without full commitment, letting her walk to free agency when the time comes, that's how franchises absolutely destroy themselves for a decade. Look at what happened in the NBA when star players left teams on bad terms. The organizations that mismanaged those situations got bad for years. They couldn't recover. They couldn't rebuild credibility. They couldn't get free agents to want to play there. And the WNBA is small enough that reputation matters. If the Fever become known as an organization that mismanaged a generational talent, that benches their stars for mistakes, that doesn't protect them from physical play, that hires coaches who don't believe in them, then nobody good is going to want to play there. That's the future the Fever is heading toward if they don't make serious changes right now. So the question isn't really whether Caitlin might leave Indiana at some point. The question is when. Will she leave after this season? Will she leave in the offseason? Will she give the organization one more year to get things right before requesting a trade? And the answer to that question depends entirely on what happens in the next few weeks and months. Let's be clear about what this situation represents. This is a generational opportunity. You don't get many chances in sports to build a franchise around someone with Caitlin Clark's talent, marketability, and cultural impact. You don't get many chances to be the team that discovered a player, drafted them, and built a dynasty around them from the ground up. The Fever had that chance. They had it handed to them. They drafted Caitlin Clark with the #1 overall pick. They got the biggest star in women's basketball. They got a player who is going to revolutionize women's sports in the same way that LeBron James, Tom Brady, and other generational talents revolutionized their respective sports. And what did they do with that opportunity? They hired a coach who didn't believe in her. They let their own players undermine her. They failed to build a competent roster around her. They failed to protect her from dangerous play. They made coaching decisions that at best looked questionable and at worst looked like they were designed to make her life harder. They used vague corporate language to avoid explaining their actual injury decisions. And they created an environment where their franchise player is seriously considering whether she wants to continue her career in Indiana. If the Fever lose Caitlin Clark because of this organizational incompetence, because they couldn't figure out how to build a functional team around a player who's carried them to relevance and profitability, that will go down as one of the biggest failures in professional sports history. Not just WNBA history, sports history, because opportunities like this don't come around often, and teams that fumble them pay a price that lasts for years. The question now is what happens next. Does the Fever front office recognize how serious this situation is? Do they understand that Caitlin Clark sitting out a meaningful game in the middle of a playoff race is a warning sign? Do they see the writing on the wall? Or are they going to keep pretending that everything's fine, that this is just a minor injury, that the relationship between their star player and their coaching staff is healthy and productive? Because from what we've seen, from the vague press conferences and the mysterious injury timeline and the public benching, it doesn't look like they get it. It doesn't look like they understand how badly they've mismanaged this situation. And if that's the case, if the Fever front office really believes everything is okay, then Caitlin Clark requesting a trade in the offseason shouldn't surprise anyone. The path is pretty clear at this point. Either the Fever makes serious organizational changes, They move Stephanie White and potentially some of the front office. They commit to building a roster around Caitlin and they earn back her trust and loyalty. Or they stick with the status quo, they hope the back injury is just a minor thing. They count on Caitlin to just tough it out and keep being professional despite being disrespected, and they watch her leave. And when she leaves, when Caitlin Clark walks away from Indiana, everyone is going to look back at the Connecticut game. They're going to look at that moment when Stephanie White pulled her from the game. They're going to see that as the moment when the Fever organization lost a generational talent. They're going to realize that they had a chance to do something historic and special, and they fumbled it because they couldn't get out of their own way. So what happens next? Does Caitlin come back after the week off and finish the season with Indiana? Does she shut it down completely and use the rest of the year to get healthy and think about her future? Or does she come back, play out the string, and then have some very difficult conversations with her agent and her family about whether staying in Indiana is the right move for her career? I don't have those answers. Nobody outside Caitlin's inner circle does. But what I do know is that this situation has reached a critical point. The next few weeks are going to tell us a lot about whether this relationship can be salvaged or whether we're watching the beginning of the end of Caitlin Clark's time with the Indiana Fever. And if it is the end, the blame falls squarely on an organization that had every advantage and still found a way to mess it up. So here's what I want to know. What do you think happens next? Have we seen Caitlin play her last game in a Fever uniform? Or is this just another bump in the road? Is there any way the Fever organization can salvage this relationship, or has the damage already been done? Let me know in the comments because this situation is evolving and I want to hear what you think. And make sure you subscribe because this story is far from over. The next few weeks are going to be crucial and we're going to be breaking down every development as it happens. This is the kind of situation that defines organizations. And the Fever's response to this crisis is going to tell us everything we need to know about whether they're capable of managing a championship caliber team. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.